So I finally made some time to play Control, and I came across this really awesome audio thing when you're in the hotel and you hear the radio playing, and then you walk a little ways away and the sound gets all distorted and slowed down and jumbled. And so I thought it would be really cool to redesign this in Wwise and Unreal Engine, with my own spin on things, of course. So I went through my Unreal assets and I found this vintage radio and this cool alley night scene that I picked up for cheap or free at some point along the road. And I threw them together and integrated them with a blank Wwise project. So here I am in Wwise. I'm going to create a blank music playlist so that I can loop my radio track. I happen to have already created a radio track for a game that ended up getting canceled. So why not pull that in here and use it for this? And then I'm going to drag it, attach it, make sure that it's looping. All right, now I'm going to make sure that this track can live in the world, and I'm going to create an attenuation so that as we get farther away from the object, it gets a little bit softer and kind of fades into, and I can place it in 3D space. I'm also, so I'm going to set this max to be 2,000 units, Unreal units, whatever that ends up being. I knew the math at some point. I think it's a simple math thing. The volume drop off to about there. I'm going to turn off occlusion just because this scene has a lot of stuff in it and I don't want it to block the sound of the radio just because I turned around a corner weird. All right, then go back in and I'm going to drop that attenuation onto my radio. I'm going to make sure that I turn on the 3D spatialization to position. I don't care about the direction of it at the moment. Here's the test of that. Nice. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an RTPC. I'm going to do that on the playback speed of the track so that as we get farther away, it's going to... I'm going to create a brand new one because I'm going to be using it for a few things. Just call it Radio RTPC. And nicely importantly here, I'm going to change the built-in parameter. I'm going to use the distance built-in parameter so that the farther away I get, I can use this little envelope shape here to make it like slow down and warp and get all creepy. And then when you're nice and close to it, that value will be down at 0, and it'll be nice and normal sounding. Just get some rough shapes. I kind of want it to stay normal for a while, and then when I get just a little ways away, at like the 600, 700, it's going to start to get all creepy and weird, and then it's going to go much steeper the farther I get until I'm at my max distance where I want it to just fully go. All right, let's test how that works. Lovely. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that same RTPC, the radio RTPC, and attach it to some effects so that when I get farther, Wwise can take, say, like a delay or a reverb and make that get crazy as well, and just have the whole world expand as I get farther away from the radio. All right, so I'm going to start with the delay, and let's see, I'm just going to use the pre-built-in echoes linear. If I double click, it'll take me over there. You could create your own version of this and not just mess with the stock, but I'm just going to do this for now. I'm going to go to the RTPC section. I'm going to attach the radio RTPC to the wet-dry mix of the delay. All right, and then I'm going to adjust the envelope to do what I said, make it nice and normal at first, and then get crazy and linear echo. All right, something like that. All right, let's hear what that sounds like. All right, it's sounding weird, which means it's sounding good. All right, let's add a reverb to it. I'm just going to use another pre-built-in room verb here. Let's go into the cathedral. Let's take it to cathedral and make it even more creepy. All right, again, I'm just going to adjust some initial values here, make the room a little bit smaller. I don't really want it sounding like I'm actually in a space. I just kind of want it getting weird and more reverby as I get away from it. Turning this dry down. I'm going to be changing the whole reverb level, this bottom one down here, with it. All right, so let's set that up. So I'm going to go into my RTPC. I'm going to select the reverb level of the output. Again, attach the same RTPC to it. This thing's working overtime. All right, let's hear what this sounds like. Nice. All right, so there's a couple more things I want to do before we pop it in the scene. First thing, I just want to add a little switch to make it sound like I'm turning on the radio to start the loop. And I'm going to blend that into the loop here. So I'm just going to drop a file on here. This is just going to be a one-off sound effect, nothing too fancy. I'm going to cut off that little end because I want it to more fade in, or like fade out as the music's fading in, kind of overlap each other a little bit. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to go into an event. I'm going to create a brand new event to start all this so that in Unreal I can just say play event and it'll do all the stuff I want it to. I'm simply just going to play the switch turning on, ka-chunk, and I'm going to play my music playlist, which loops endlessly. I'm going to delay it gently to make it so that it can kind of fade in with that, but starting a little bit later. See what this sounds like. Oh, first, I'm going to make sure that I want the switch to also use the radio attenuation that we set up to put it in the same space. All right, one more thing that I want to do here is set up another looping kind of ambient music pad that happens when I'm at maximum distance and the radio's getting a little creepy. I want this to also kind of fade in to give it just an extra ambiance, but non-diegetic, so it won't be in the world, it'll be 2D. We'll be hearing it like normal music. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to turn off any 3D stuff on this just to make it nice and simple for now. All right, I'm going to add in the same RTPC that we created earlier that's been driving all of this stuff, but I'm going to attach it to the voice volume of that one track so that as we're farther along, it'll start to fade in. But I'm going to make it so it doesn't fade in at all until we're already pretty far in. Nice. All right, now I'm just going to add it to start at the same time as the other things start, so that in Unreal I'm literally just triggering one event and all of this logic is happening. All right, let's test it out. Beautiful. Ship it. All right, I'm just going to generate some sound banks, go into Unreal, the scene that I set up, go into the Wwise browser and generate the sound banks there. Now, I need to attach it to the game object. And so I have the object of the radio, and essentially all I'm going to do is add a little trigger sphere around that so that once my player gets in that space, it says, I've collided with that, trigger the event, and then in Wwise, all of the logic is already being handled to play the switch sound, to play the first loop and play the second loop, and then the RTPC of distance is going to be attached to that object that it's created on, and so that'll stay put, and as I move, the listener's on my character, so as I move, I will hear the different changes in the RTPC. So all I'm doing code-wise in Blueprints is setting up just a little post event, essentially. I'm also using a do once node so that if I keep going back and forth to the radio, it only triggers one time. And so that would satisfy the prompt of this video, but I want to add a couple of extra elements just to make the scene more fun. I'm going to add some footsteps that trigger. So this is first person camera, and so the footsteps are going to be just doing a quick and easy ray trace down, and then it's going to be using that ray trace to run a timeline that is just going to be playing a footstep, a random footstep sound every 1 second roughly here. And then I'm going to attach that timeline to be looping based on certain inputs like WASD. Beautiful. Footsteps. Simple. We could go a lot more in depth. Right now I'm not doing any kind of material check. I'm kind of just assuming I'm walking on the concrete. I'm also not changing the speed, so all our walking is at the same speed. But for this demo, great. I also added some different ambient sounds to make it really come to life. I've got the sounds of distant traffic happening, kind of just ambient alley sounds that you would hear out in the world. And then there's also little spot ambiences, so fluorescent lights, so you'll hear the nice buzz, and the little grates on the ground, you'll hear the, and then when you walk past AC units, we'll hear the nice AC unit sound. I've had these set up with their own attenuations, and I'm just attaching them, just dropping the events to auto post in these spots. All right, here's the full scene.